Hello, this is Laptop Radio. I am DJ Laptop at KZSU Stanford 90.1 FM. Today we're going to talk with Ivy Nguyen. She's a VC on how to build an AI-powered business. Ivy Nguyen is a VC at Zetta Ventures Partners. She's an investor and startup advisor in the technology space. And prior to Zetta Ventures, Ivy was a senior associate at NewGen Capital. NewGen is a VC firm providing early-stage deep tech startups with growth opportunity. Ivy earned her BS in chemical engineering from Stanford University. She also served as news managing editor of the Stanford Daily. Again, today's topic is how to build an AI-powered business and a framework for how to predict what areas AI will affect first. So Ivy, tell us a little about your role at Zetta Ventures Partners.
Sure. So I am one of 4 investors at Zetta Ventures, and a little bit more background on Zetta. We are the first VC fund to focus exclusively on seed and Series A stage investments in intelligent software companies. And what we mean by that are basically businesses that are building or bringing value and building products around the idea that they have some special algorithm that learns from a data set that improves with the more data that you feed to it, and are using that in some way to make the world a better place. So some of the interesting things that we've backed include automated sales solutions, workplace automation, like energy management for buildings, and automatic robotic insurance claims, just kind of among some of the breadth of the areas that we look at in terms of investment. And then once what we do once the founder of a company decides to partner with us is we help them think very strategically about what it means to build a software business in this new era of intelligent software. In terms of what types of data to gather, how to approach customers in a way that makes sense and is a good use of their time and money, and then how to bring in all the different partners that are necessary to help them grow and turn into a very large company.
Awesome. So, Ivy, what is your story? How were you involved?
How am I involved in Zetta, or how was I involved in venture in general?
Just in general.
Sure. So it's actually kind of a long, meandering story. When I was at Stanford, this was about 2013, and the guy who founded Snapchat was just a year above me. I really thought that the whole startup ecosystem and the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem was the dumbest thing ever, because on the one hand, they were talking about changing the world and making the world a better place, and on the other hand, they were it felt like they were basically just raising millions of dollars to build tools and build stupid apps for people to, one, sell drugs, and then two, send naked selfies of themselves to one another. And I was really kind of jaded by that idea. But it didn't really connect, it didn't seem like that was really making the world a better place. So I did the very typical Stanford thing, which is I decided to, with a very limited understanding of the water and clean tech sector, decided to start my own business. I went back to Vietnam and then tried to run my own company, trying to bring clean water access to rural communities. And very quickly, I hit a wall. We got to a certain point, and we couldn't figure out how to grow that company any larger. And that was when I kind of had a soul searching or an about face, where I realized that, for all of its flaws, the one thing that the venture capital and startup community understood very well when it did work was how to get to massive global scale. So this is when, Uber was starting to expand into China and other countries all across the globe. Airbnb doing the same, and it was really clear that there was something to venture and something to startup that I really had a lot to learn from. So that was when I decided to really go over to the dark side and really understand exactly how this business works and how all of these big success stories managed to build that playbook to really impact massive change at a global scale.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Wow. So the topic today is about how to do an AI-powered business, and AI is a very trending topic right now, and a lot of people is confused about the definition of AI. So I just want to start by asking you, what is AI?
Sure. So we at Zetta are very generous with our definition of AI, and we actually use the word AI as much as we use the word intelligent systems. Because as you might have guessed, a lot of people have really conflated the definition of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all these different approaches to automating systems. So how we see intelligent systems is we just see them as another form of software that basically improves and kind of evolves automatically, independent of a programmer or a coder having to go and adjust the actual underlying code. Each time it sees an additional piece of information, each time it sees data. So a good example of AI, if you will, or an intelligent system that we've all had exposure to is Google search results or our Netflix queue. As the more you use the product, the better Google or Netflix has an understanding of what we're looking for, what we actually want, and so on. And they can much more quickly surface those recommendations to you automatically, instead of having some engineer in the back kind of reorganizing and reconfiguring the algorithms to get a solution specific to Ivy and Ivy's preferences. Does that kind of make sense?
That makes sense. So AI is not new, right? I mean, it's deep learning, digital assistant, NLP, and it's been around for years and years.
Yes, absolutely. It's been around for a lot of several decades. I mean, for many decades, since the early 50s, even, depending on how you define AI. But this idea that we can get code to self-evolve and self-propagate is something that's definitely not new at all. But what's changed over the past 2 or 3 years, is that we've reached critical mass in terms of general computing infrastructure. With the rise of cloud computing and services like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and so on, it's now easier and cheaper than ever to spin up a bunch of servers and a bunch of databases to, really have computing capacity that you need to run these fairly intensive, algorithms in a way that, previously you'd have to spend thousands, if not millions of dollars to set up in order to enable you to do that kind of research. And so, we've really just kind of got into the critical mass in terms of infrastructure to support this kind of experimentation, this kind of work at scale.
So if I'm a consumer and just a normal consumer, I guess, and I'm working, going home at night, watching TV, just doing my normal thing, how will AI impact me as a consumer? And what is the impact of AI?
Sure, absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've already seen the impact of AI, since the early 2000s, and we just didn't really know it, and we just haven't really been calling it AI. So, again, Google and Netflix are very obvious examples, and actually on the consumer side has been where AI has enjoyed the earliest penetration. The Facebook newsfeed, for example, how Facebook decides what posts, what events, what ads and so on to surface to you in your newsfeed and to make prominent, is another application of machine learning. It learns based on your preferences, based on your likes, and your engagement with the content to better tailor content that will encourage you to engage further. As it finds a better fit with what it thinks you're looking for. And that's actually kind of the framework that we've applied to try to map out and predict where AI is going to propagate, throughout different industries, throughout different verticals and different applications. Is that, we have this theory that the earliest adopters, well, anyone and any industry considering the adoption of new technology, and particularly in AI, it's basically a calculus of risk versus reward. We break that down as, one, the degree of financial risk that is incurred if the technology goes completely awry. So, for example, if in a bank transfer, if that completely fails, how much money are you going to lose if all this goes wrong? Second is the degree of health or safety risk, right? So how many people would get hurt if the solution goes completely wrong? And then Third is the degree of labor augmentation. So, could this solution help me do the work of 10 people, 100 people, and so on? Or does it really only have limited effect in helping me do more work with fewer people? And then four, the degree of capital augmentation. So, how could this help me stretch any $1 that I invest into, whatever I'm doing to make it, have the same impact as if I'd invested $100, $1,000 or more. So kind of using that framework and using that risk versus reward idea and balance, we see that on the consumer side, let's use Facebook Newsfeed as an example. Say Facebook fails to surface the right, like your friend's birthday like notification or some invitation to a party. That sucks, and that might be mildly annoying, but that's definitely not a life or death kind of situation, as you can imagine. And then, so that's something that we've, and so there's a lot more room to experiment and a lot more room, for things to really just go wrong and to just really test out all these crazy ideas and all these applications. Now that we've really tested that out quite a bit for effectively a decade now, we're starting to see some of those use cases and take some of those lessons learned in the lower risk consumer side into the application space. So, some of the places where we at Zetta have already seen this being applied successfully have been in areas where, again, if it fails, it's no huge loss to the organization, but if it works, it can provide a huge advantage to the organization that is using this AI solution. So one example of that might be in targeted sales and marketing, right? Using AI, for example, to figure out, what exactly should I sell to Ivy, when, and then, at where she is during her commute, would she be most likely to buy this this dress or this article of clothing or this chocolate bar or whatever. So and then further extrapolating that, we're starting to see AI applied to, like, now that we've been able to test out the technology even further and refine the technology even further and kind of reduce the technical risk of adoption, we're seeing AI being applied to more mission critical things. One very cool company that we've recently invested in is one called Nguyen. And what they do is they help power companies very accurately predict demand, for their power. And so these power companies can basically generate just enough energy so that they don't actually have to waste any of the energy that they produce or have to buy any excess energy if they incorrectly anticipate demand for the next day. And that's already saved a lot of their customers on the order of millions of dollars, and has enabled this company to also generate lots of revenue.
Okay, awesome. So we're on the topic of consumers. So on the consumer side, of course, there's huge impact depending on what you do and your contribution to society and your passion and your interests. A lot of people worry about AI taking over and specifically taking away our jobs. Do you think that is a possibility?
I had this conversation a lot with my friends, and with anyone, since we are in the business of investing in AI and furthering AI. And a big takeaway and a big framework that I encourage people to think about when I think about what AI will automate is, what AI is good at and what computers are good at is very narrowly defined tasks and very repeatable tasks, and those tasks done at massive scale. And so maybe let's think about the idea of cleaning a house as an example. So if you tell, there's a very good reason that in 2017 we have the Roomba, which was which I think was introduced in 1998. And almost 20 years after, we still only have a Roomba. We don't have, a multi-purpose cleaning robot. And the reason is, robots are very good, again, at very narrowly defined tasks, like move back and forth across the floor and try to cover as much of it as possible while you, vacuum up dust. That's something a robot can handle, but a more broadly defined tasks like clean a room, right? What does cleaning a room entail? You might have to move some furniture first. You might have to dust some things first, pick up clothes off the floor first. That's way too complicated. And that's something that will take, a lot of computing and a lot more development for, any algorithm and any robot to be able to handle. And I think using that framework and kind of using that as a starting point for how you think about what jobs AI would automate, it would be really helpful. So thinking about my own job, for example, a lot of the repetitive tasks like data entry, like doing budgeting and accounting, that's repeatable and that's fairly clearly defined. That's something that I see AI slowly starting to be able to automate and take away. But in more broadly defined things like when exactly to schedule a meeting so that it works for both me and the person that I plan to meet with. I've seen some people attempt to do that, with AI or personal virtual assistants like X.AI or JulieBot, and none of them, to be frank, have worked all that well. And I think that we're still a ways away from having even like kind of medium skill jobs like that be completely automated and completely taken away by robots.
So just a follow-up question on that is there, do you see a situation where humans can get hurt by the automation?
Oh, absolutely. So, just thinking back to the 80s even, there was, a case where this wasn't completely automated. This was like a semi-automated solution or like a program that helped determine how much radiation a cancer patient would receive, during chemo. I think the algorithm was basically programmed in such a way that it confused metric units with imperial units, and then what happened was a lot of these patients ended up getting 10x or even 100x the recommended dose. For their treatment, and then they ended up dying. And so I can very much anticipate situations where, like an AI solution doesn't necessarily run away and turn into a killing robot, but, whereas just even the basic parameters that it was programmed, was not necessarily well thought out, or, well controlled, and it was deployed too early, which would cause a lot of harm, unfortunately.
Okay, let's move into the topic of how do we build an AI-powered business. So as an entrepreneur, as a young student at Stanford, as a young person in America or globally everywhere else, how do we build an AI-powered business?
Yeah, so I think before I jump into how to build an AI-powered business, I want to kind of level set with the declaration that the lean startup methodology, which I think a lot of your listeners, are, especially if they're involved in the startup space, probably know very well. The idea, our thesis of Zetta is that those companies or that methodology no longer applies in this new intelligence era. And the reason is because it's now easier than ever to start up a company, to basically wrap a bunch of APIs together to push out a new product and so on. That if you're onto something new and if you have a cool new product, a copycat can appear in a matter of hours. And so you, in this new intelligence era, you need to basically build a much stronger competitive moat, and everything that you need to do at the beginning requires a lot of upfront investment in the foundation to be able to enable you to build that strong competitive moat. We call that kind of the virtuous loop that helps you build out what we call data network effects. And what I mean by that, again, is going back to how we define intelligent software companies is, you want to take a kind of unique source of data that will train this algorithm that's designed to learn from the data that you feed it. Every bit of data that you feed this algorithm makes its performance better. Each time its performance is better, it will enable you to attract more customers who will then help you find more data that will feed it back into that loop, and so on and so on. And kind of with every iteration of that cycle and every turn of that loop, you have a much stronger product and you have a much larger and much more meaningful hold on the ecosystem. So that's kind of the first step. Which is identifying that right partner and that right use case, where where an AI application does make sense. And kind of going back to the framework that I mentioned earlier, which is finding the right balance of significant return on investment, but at the same time, a reduction of risk in the event that the technology goes wrong. And that's just kind of like a brief overview. And then I think related to that, a big question that companies in the intelligence era will have to contend with is data is basically gold. Data is king in this era because the more data you have, the better data you have, the better your product will be, the more competitive you will be relative to any upstart or any potential new competitor. And so as people begin to understand how valuable data is, it will be, you might face challenges in negotiating the rights to access that data with, from your customers. Right now as consumers, we really don't think about the kind of data that, we're giving Google or Facebook or Apple or so on, in exchange for using their products for effectively free or at a highly subsidized rate. That's something that I think, both consumer customers as well as enterprise customers will start to be more wary of, and that's something that companies will have to be more mindful of in terms of navigating as, the entire world gets more savvy on the value of data.
Awesome. So data sounds like it's going to be more important as we grow the company, and it sounds like the head start is very important because then if you start early, then you might have more data, and that might be an advantage as you build the company. What are some, how could we, besides a competitor or having that certain advantage, what else do you think would make a young company successful?
I just thought, it's a common fallacy to think that just having a head start and having the most data helps you win. Mm-hmm. I think what's more important is also building the foundation to make sure that the data you collect is clean and correct, and two, actually easy to use and easy to access. Because it's nice if you're able to sit on a big hoard of data, but if it's sitting in CSV files or Excel spreadsheets or in these databases that you can't sort your way through, you can't actually do anything with that data. And a lot of companies and a lot of younger founders that I meet really underestimate how important it is to lay out that foundation and to invest some extra time in making sure that your data streams are clean, making sure that they're reliable and so on. So that as the growth of your company and the pace of your company's growth starts to pick up, you won't have that extra time to go back and kind of fix those mistakes and shore up that foundation. So it's very important to really invest in that time early on and really think about and plan out exactly what you'll need to build out a company for the long haul.
Since we're talking about success, and then I want to move and talk a little bit about failure, because I think most people don't talk about that in the Silicon Valley, and I think it's very important to know, what holes in your business plan or in your startup. What are one major failure you think startups fail to see, and how can we avoid that?
As a former technologist, as someone who works with, very bright and very technical people, a big problem that I see is, sometimes especially for more technical founders, they come up with some incredibly elegant algorithm, some incredibly elegant technical solution that really, unfortunately, has, no good use case in the market. And so, you're basically a hammer in search of a nail. And sometimes, as elegant and as complicated and technically impressive as your solution is, there might not be enough of a financial incentive for the customer to abandon what they're already using, which might be a boring, kind of clunky and stupid solution that's just good enough. If it's really expensive for them to set that aside and then kind of implement your new solution. And so just really understanding what exactly, like what value your technology is actually providing to your customers. It's something that I encourage all founders to really think about before they decide whether or not to risk everything and put everything on the line to start a business.
Awesome. We have like 1 minute left. And so in closing, I wanted to ask you, just one brief prediction in terms of the future of AI and one wisdom for everyone who's listening here at KZSU Stanford 90.1 FM.
Sure. So, like, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to see AI being applied to, more kind of world-changing, more high-risk applications. So very recently, I saw a company that was applying AI to basically track at the molecular level tumor growth and tumor progression, so that you can make much faster treatment decisions and help a patient progress through chemo faster, saving very valuable treatment time, and also saving the patient from unnecessary pain of having to go through a cycle of chemo use a drug that might have some awful side effects, but might not actually do anything to help cure them of their cancer. So we're starting to see kind of higher risk and also more impactful uses of AI beyond the more superficial things like Netflix, movie suggestions, and Amazon, like search result product suggestions, and that's something that I'm very excited about and very excited to see.
What is one wisdom that you wanted to provide to all the listeners here at Stanford at 90.1 FM?
Yeah, if I could go back to my younger undergraduate self, I think, like what I would say is that the Stanford community especially has such an amazing ecosystem and such a broad ecosystem of, very well-meaning and very bright people, and that as silly as some of the experimentations might be, and as stupid as Snapchat might sound, there's a lot of interesting new ideas that are being tested out. And one of the best things about Stanford is that there's this ethos of, that's cool and that's weird and that's different. Let's try it. And so, if you still have a lot of time to experiment, and if you do have that freedom to just really dive in deeply and explore kind of a wacky, out there idea to the very end, definitely do it, because, who knows what interesting new insight, you might, come back with and be able to change the world with. Some advancement in AI or some new application in AI might be one of them.
Thank you, Ivy. Thank you for being and chatting with us today. This is DJ Laptop at Laptop Radio at KZSU Stanford 90.1 FM. We just spoke with Nguyen. She's a VC. And the topic is how to build an AI-powered business. Thank you, everyone, for listening.